The aroma of freshly baked cinnamon rolls and simmering spiced apple cider, usually comforting scents synonymous with warmth and familial cheer, seemed to curdle in the air around me. My grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, her delicate hands resting on my arm, looked up at me with eyes that, while clouded by age, still held a surprisingly sharp glint. "Such a wonderful birthday celebration, dear," she murmured, her voice a little reedy now, but perfectly clear. "And I do hope the 3,000 pounds helped. I meant for it to be a little something extra for your research, to give you a bit of a boost, you know. My name is Alex Albright, 46 years old, and for the past 2 decades, my life has been dedicated to the meticulous, often solitary, pursuit of data integrity. I am a senior cryptographer for a leading cybersecurity firm, a specialist in identifying anomalies, tracing hidden digital footprints, and discerning patterns of intrusion or deception within complex, interconnected systems. Grandma Eleanor's comment, delivered with such innocent sincerity, was a significant anomaly. 3,000 pounds, a substantial sum, particularly for a woman on a fixed income, a sum I knew, with absolute certainty, I had never received. My 40th birthday party, held just last week, had been a modest affair, a quiet dinner with my closest friends and family. There had been no envelopes containing large sums of money, no unexpected windfalls. I had received a beautifully bound first edition of a rare scientific text from my brother, Arthur, a rather expensive, if somewhat ostentatious, vintage watch from my parents, and a thoughtful, hand-knitted scarf from my cousin, Clarissa, who had, of late, become rather vocal about her newfound passion for artisanal textile design. I looked at Grandma Eleanor, her gaze unwavering, clearly believing what she was saying. Was it a simple memory lapse, a common enough occurrence in her later years? Or was it something more insidious? A seed of cold dread began to plant itself in my mind, a suspicion that, once rooted, would demand a full, uncompromising audit. My parents, Henry and Beatrice, were circulating through the crowded living room, basking in the glow of their carefully curated image of familial contentment. Henry, a retired and rather pompous mid-level executive, was holding court by the fireplace, pontificating on the enduring virtues of old money and sensible investments. Beatrice, my mother, was flitting from guest to guest, a butterfly of superficial charm. Her conversation punctuated by subtle boasts about Arthur's thriving career as a financial advisor and Clarissa's exotic, if somewhat unconventional, artistic pursuits. My own profession, while intellectually stimulating and financially secure, had always been a source of quiet disappointment to them, lacking the visible prestige they so valued. I was the quiet one, the brilliant but socially awkward one, the one whose work in computers and codes was vaguely understood as important, but certainly not as impressive as Arthur's ability to manage other people's money or Clarissa's ability to spend it. Arthur, my younger brother by 5 years, a man whose easy charm masked a ruthless ambition, was across the room, engaged in a vigorous and rather theatrical discussion about the latest trends in global markets. He glanced at me, a brief, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, his smile as impenetrable as a high-level encryption. He was the golden child, the one who effortlessly embodied all of my father's narrow, materialistic ideals of success. His wife, Cynthia, equally ambitious and impeccably groomed, stood beside him, a perfect picture of supportive, affluent domesticity. Clarissa, my cousin, a woman whose life was a perpetual and often self-inflicted financial drama, was, ironically, engaged in a rather animated conversation with Grandma Eleanor about her latest and inevitably unremunerative art project. Clarissa was, I knew, always in need of a small loan, a bit of seed money, a bridge to the next big breakthrough. My grandmother, in her boundless, if sometimes misguided, generosity, had often been a source of such small, quiet, and usually unrepaid infusions of capital. Was this 3,000 pounds another such instance, disguised as a gift to me? Or was it something more cynical, more calculated? The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. I offered Grandma Eleanor a reassuring smile, my mind already racing, processing the data points. The genuine conviction in her eyes, the specific amount mentioned, the timing of my birthday, it all suggested a deliberate act, not a random memory flicker. But if I hadn't received it, who had? And why? My cryptographic training, my career-long pursuit of hidden truths, compelled me to investigate. This wasn't just about a missing 3,000 pounds. It was about a breach of trust, a manipulation of my kind, elderly grandmother, and a potential underlying pattern of deception that threatened the integrity of my family's relationships. I excused myself from Uncle George, murmuring something about needing to retrieve a forgotten birthday card from my car. As I walked out into the cool evening air, leaving the warm, scented facade of familial bliss behind, I pulled out my phone. My first call would be to Alastair Finch, my solicitor and a man who understood, perhaps better than anyone, the intricate, often opaque, architecture of family trusts and discreet financial investigations. The 3,000 pounds was not just a discrepancy. It was a flag, a silent alarm indicating a potential network intrusion. And the cybersecurity expert, the man who spent his life protecting complex systems from such breaches, was about to begin his own deeply personal forensic audit. The family reunion, I suspected, was about to become significantly more transparent. My initial reaction to Grandma Eleanor's comment, the missing 3,000 pounds, was not one of immediate alarm, but rather a methodical approach to data verification. In my profession, every anomaly, however small, warrants investigation. A financial discrepancy of that magnitude, particularly involving an elderly relative known for her kindness and occasional, if fleeting, forgetfulness, was a red flag that demanded immediate attention. My first step was to discreetly ascertain the veracity of Grandma's claim. I spent the remainder of the birthday party engaged in polite conversation, occasionally drifting near Grandma Eleanor, listening intently for any further clues. She continued to speak of the wonderful party, of my very thoughtful gift, occasionally mentioning its amount with a satisfied smile. Her conviction was absolute. She truly believed she had given me the money. This eliminated the possibility of a simple memory lapse on her part regarding the amount. If she was mistaken, she was consistently so, which suggested a deeper, perhaps externally influenced, deception. I made a mental note, confirmed discrepancy. That evening, back in my quiet, meticulously organized home, I began my preliminary reconnaissance. My own bank accounts, of course, showed no deposit of 3,000 pounds from Grandma Eleanor or from any other unexpected source. This was the most basic level of verification, and it confirmed the missing funds. My focus then shifted to Grandma Eleanor's financial records. While I didn't have direct access to her accounts, I knew that she, like many elderly individuals, relied heavily on her bank statements and checkbook registers, which she kept in a small, slightly dusty, but meticulously organized drawer in her study. My parents often went over her finances with her, and Arthur, my brother, as a financial advisor, presumably had access to her online accounts, or at least provided advice on their management. I needed to access these records without arousing suspicion. My opportunity came a few days later. My mother, Beatrice, called, her voice tinged with a familiar martyrdom, to inform me that Grandma Eleanor was having a spot of bother with her internet banking, and could I, the computer whiz, perhaps come over and sort it out for her? It was a common occurrence, one I usually tolerated with a resigned sigh. Today, however, it was a golden opportunity. I arrived at Grandma Eleanor's house armed with my usual toolkit of patience, technical expertise, and a hidden USB drive configured for discrete data extraction. While ostensibly troubleshooting her Wi-Fi connection and resetting her banking passwords, which, predictably, she had forgotten, I quietly accessed her online bank statements for the past 6 months. The 3,000 pounds leapt out at me. A single, distinct withdrawal, dated 2 days before my birthday. The memo line was chillingly specific. Birthday gift, Thomas. The funds had been transferred via interbank transfer to an account I did not recognize, an account number that did not belong to me. This was not a memory lapse. This was deliberate. This was fraud. I quickly and discreetly copied the relevant transaction details, along with the preceding and following 2 months of statements, onto my USB drive. I also noted a pattern of other, smaller but regular, cash withdrawals over the past year, withdrawals that did not seem to correspond to any of Grandma's known expenditures or needs. These, I suspected, were the small loans Clarissa was constantly securing from her, disguised as seed money for her various artistic endeavors. While I was still at Grandma's, my mother, Beatrice, hovered over me, ostensibly offering helpful advice, but in reality, providing a running commentary on Grandma's supposed forgetfulness. "Oh dear," she sighed, watching me reset Grandma's password. "She's so muddled these days, always forgetting things. Just last week, she was convinced she'd given Arthur a rather large check for his new investment idea. Arthur had to politely remind her that it must have been a dream. Such a burden, trying to keep track of her affairs. A large check to Arthur. Another anomaly. A deliberate lie by my mother, designed to reinforce the narrative of Grandma's failing memory, and perhaps to cover for Arthur's own potential complicity in some other, equally dubious financial transaction. The hairs on the back of my neck pricked. This was becoming more complex, more insidious than a simple £3,000 theft. This was a systematic exploitation, a coordinated campaign of deception against my grandmother, and perhaps against me. Back in my own home, armed with the new data, I initiated the next phase of my investigation. My first step was to trace the account number to which the £3,000 had been transferred, using some of the more advanced and entirely legal tools of my trade. Public financial registries, open-source intelligence databases, cross-referencing with other known financial data points. I quickly identified the recipient. It was a holding company, Alchemy Arts Collective, LLC. The listed director and primary shareholder, Clarissa Miller. My cousin, the one who had given me the scarf. The one who was always in need of a small loan. Alchemy Arts Collective, LLC. The name alone, with its thinly veiled pretensions to artistic endeavor and its rather transparent attempt at financial obfuscation, was enough to confirm my suspicions. Clarissa was using her artisanal textile design as a front for extracting funds from Grandma Eleanor. The £3,000 was not a mistake. It was a deliberate act of fraud. And the birthday gift was a pathetic attempt to provide a veneer of legitimacy to her ongoing, and now clearly systematic, exploitation of my grandmother's generosity. My next step was to dig deeper into Alchemy Arts Collective, LLC, to expose the full extent of Clarissa's financial machinations, and to confirm Arthur's potential involvement in, or knowledge of, the deception. My own brother, the supposedly successful financial advisor. If he was in on this, if he was actively enabling Clarissa's exploitation of our grandmother, then the betrayal would be profound, almost unbearable. The cybersecurity expert was about to initiate a full, top-to-bottom, and entirely unwelcome audit of his own family's financial integrity. And the findings, I suspected, would not be pretty, but they would be the truth. And Grandma Eleanor and I deserved nothing less. My investigation into Alchemy Arts Collective, LLC, Clarissa's supposed entrepreneurial venture, quickly revealed it to be a transparently fraudulent shell, a flimsy facade for a systematic campaign of financial extraction targeting my grandmother. Working from my home office, using the kind of deep-dive analytical tools I employed in my professional life to trace complex financial architectures, I pieced together a damning picture. The LLC, purportedly a hub for cutting-edge textile design, had no discernible business activity beyond a bare-bones website featuring stock photos of abstract art and a dubious e-commerce portal with no actual products listed for sale. Its expenses consisted primarily of vague consulting fees and marketing disbursements, sums that, when cross-referenced with Clarissa's lavish lifestyle, gleaned from her increasingly boastful social media posts, clearly went towards funding her expensive holidays, designer clothes, and her continued pursuit of an entirely unremunerative art career. More damningly, the primary source of Alchemy Arts Collective's revenue, outside of a few equally dubious angel investor payments that seemed to originate from accounts linked to Julian Vance, a well-known and rather notorious charlatan and wealth guru, whom Clarissa had recently become associated with, and whose methods I was becoming increasingly familiar with through my own firm's intelligence network, was a series of direct and largely unexplained transfers from Grandma Eleanor's personal accounts. The £3,000 was just one data point in a much larger and far more extensive pattern of exploitation. Over the past year, Clarissa had systematically extracted over £20,000 from Grandma Eleanor, meticulously disguised as various investments, donations, and loans for Alchemy Arts Collective's groundbreaking projects. The financial trail was clear, irrefutable, and the emotional manipulation, the exploitation of Grandma's trusting nature and her desire to see her grandchildren succeed was heartbreakingly evident. The deeper I dug, the more convinced I became that Clarissa was not acting alone. The sophistication of the shell company setup, the clever, if ultimately transparent, obfuscation of the financial flows, the calculated manipulation of Grandma Eleanor's generosity. These were not the hallmarks of Clarissa's usual, more amateurish financial follies. She was, I suspected, being guided, advised, perhaps even actively controlled by someone else. Julian Vance. His name had surfaced in my initial research, linked to Alchemy Arts Collective through a series of thinly veiled investment payments. My firm's cybersecurity intelligence network, which tracked known fraud patterns and individuals, had extensive files on Vance. He was a professional predator, a master of psychological manipulation and financial deception, whose entire career was built on exploiting the vulnerabilities of others, particularly affluent but often lonely or insecure individuals. His methods were insidious. He would identify a target, flatter their vanity, promise them a path to wealth and personal power, and then slowly, systematically, drain their resources through a complex web of sham investments and lucrative consulting fees. His connection to Clarissa, I now realized, went far beyond a mere guru-disciple relationship. He was her handler, her partner in this systematic exploitation of Grandma Eleanor. The idea that my own cousin was knowingly and ruthlessly preying on our beloved grandmother, with the assistance of a notorious con artist, filled me with a cold, hard fury. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that turned my quiet, analytical anger into a burning sense of righteous indignation, concerned my brother, Arthur. The large check Beatrice had mentioned Grandma Eleanor had supposedly given to Arthur, a check Arthur had then supposedly dismissed as a dream. That discrepancy had bothered me. My initial financial audit had revealed no such large deposit in Arthur's publicly declared accounts. But my firm's network, with its access to more discreet financial intelligence, had ways of identifying hidden assets, of tracing unusual capital flows. What I discovered was a direct and substantial transfer from Grandma Eleanor's account to an offshore holding company, registered in a jurisdiction known for its impenetrable corporate privacy laws. The memo. Investment, Arthur. The date. 2 days before Beatrice's dream comet. Arthur, my own brother, the supposed pillar of financial probity, was not only aware of Clarissa's exploitation of Grandma Eleanor. He was a knowing participant. He had received a significant sum, perhaps as a payoff for his silence, or as an investment in his own dubious schemes, a sum he had deliberately concealed from my parents, from me, from any legal scrutiny. He was complicit. The golden child, the successful financial advisor, was as corrupt and as greedy as the artisanal textile designer he was enabling. The betrayal was complete, multi-layered, and utterly, heartbreakingly absolute. I had a meticulous, unassailable dossier on all of them. Clarissa, Julian Vance, and my own brother, Arthur. Every transaction, every email. I had also managed to access some of Clarissa's less secure cloud-based communications, filled with fawning messages to Vance and anxious inquiries about her investment returns. Every phone record, every discrepancy was documented, cross-referenced, and ready for deployment. The total sum extracted from Grandma Eleanor over the past year and a half, between Clarissa's projects and Arthur's investments, exceeded £50,000, a sum that, while not catastrophic for Grandma's overall well-being, Grandma Eleanor, thankfully, possessed a surprisingly robust nest egg, was certainly significant and a profound breach of trust. My next step was clear. I needed to consult with Alastair Finch, my solicitor. He had been instrumental in setting up Grandma Eleanor's trust years ago, trust designed to be impervious to precisely this kind of opportunistic avarice. He would know the precise legal mechanisms to deploy. I needed to present him with this entire, deeply unpleasant, but utterly undeniable narrative. This wasn't just about the £3,000 or even the $50,000. This was about justice. It was about protecting my kind, generous grandmother from her own predatory family members. And it was about exposing the true, ugly nature of my brother, the man who had, for so long, held himself up as the very embodiment of success and integrity, but who was, in fact, a conniving, greedy, and morally bankrupt hypocrite. The cybersecurity expert was about to unleash a very real and very public data breach on his own family. And the fallout, I knew, would be spectacular. The family reunion, I suspected, was about to be canceled. Permanently. My call to Alastair Finch was, as expected, lengthy and filled with a grim, almost forensic, detail. I laid out the entire, sordid narrative. Clarissa's systematic exploitation of Grandma Eleanor, Julian Vance's predatory influence, and most damningly, Arthur's complicity, his active participation in the scheme, and his deliberate concealment of his own illicit gains. Alastair listened without interruption, his only sounds the occasional thoughtful hum or a sharp intake of breath as I revealed a particularly egregious detail of the financial malfeasance. When I had finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the line. "Good heavens, Alex," Alastair said finally, his voice low, tinged with a rare note of genuine outrage. This is truly shocking. Not just the scale of the fraud, but the sheer audacity of the familial betrayal. Your father and brother to prey on an elderly relative in such a manner. It is beyond reprehensible. And to involve your grandmother's own trusted financial advisor, Arthur, in such a scheme is a profound breach of every conceivable ethical and legal duty. He then outlined the immediate legal ramifications. The evidence I had gathered was, he confirmed, more than sufficient to initiate a full-scale legal assault. We could pursue criminal charges for fraud, for elder abuse, for conspiracy. We could file a civil suit for full restitution of all misappropriated funds, plus interest and punitive damages. And crucially, we could trigger a rarely used, but exceptionally powerful, clause in Grandma Eleanor's will and the primary family trust, a disinheritance for cause provision, a sort of poison pill designed by my shrewd great-grandfather to disinherit any beneficiary found to have engaged in gross moral turpitude or actions detrimental to the family's integrity. This clause, Alastair confirmed, was specifically intended to guard against precisely the kind of avarice and deceit my father and Clarissa were now guilty of. It was, Alastair noted with a grim satisfaction, a legal atom bomb, designed to be deployed only in the most extreme circumstances. "What is your desired outcome here, Alex?" Alastair asked, his voice now calm, pragmatic. "Do you want to see your father and brother in prison? Or is your primary objective to secure full restitution for Grandma Eleanor, to permanently sever their access to her remaining assets, and to ensure they never again profit from their deceit?" It was a crucial question. The thought of seeing my own father and brother incarcerated, of exposing their crimes to the full glare of public scrutiny, was a dark, tempting prospect, a profound and final act of retribution. But I also knew the devastation it would cause to Grandma Eleanor, to my mother, to the wider family. My ultimate objective was to protect Grandma, to secure her peace of mind, and to ensure that my family, those who had so casually, so contemptuously dismissed me as a loser, faced the consequences of their actions in a way that would be undeniable, indelible, and financially devastating. "Alastair," I said after a moment's careful thought, "my primary objective is to make them pay back every penny, with interest, to permanently cut them off from any future access to Grandma Eleanor's wealth, and to ensure they never again have the opportunity to prey on her or on any other vulnerable member of our family. As for criminal charges, I believe the prospect of such charges, the threat of public exposure, the knowledge that I possess the irrefutable evidence of their crimes, will be a far more powerful and personally devastating deterrent than any jail sentence. I want them to live with the knowledge of what they did and what they lost, permanently. Alistair smiled, a thin, grim smile that was entirely devoid of warmth. A controlled demolition, then, rather than a full-scale, indiscriminate detonation. Very well, an elegant solution, and one that, I assure you, will be profoundly effective. This disinheritance for cause clause, in particular, will ensure that their future financial landscape is significantly altered, and irrevocably so. He then outlined the precise legal strategy. We would file a formal petition with the probate court, seeking a judicial declaration that Arthur and Clarissa had, by their actions, triggered the disinheritance for cause clause in Grandma Eleanor's trust. This petition would be supported by my comprehensive dossier of evidence, detailing every fraudulent transaction, every lie, every instance of exploitation. At the same time, we would serve them with a formal demand for immediate and full restitution of all misappropriated funds, with a clear warning that failure to comply would result in immediate civil litigation and a referral to the appropriate financial authorities for criminal investigation. The delivery of this package, Alistair said, his eyes gleaming with a litigator's grim delight, will be impactful. We will arrange for it to be delivered by courier simultaneously to your father's home, to Arthur's accounting firm, and to Clarissa's Alchemy Arts Collective LLC, which I suspect will soon be facing some rather inconvenient inquiries from the tax authorities. We will also ensure that the formal notice of the probate court petition is delivered to the chairman of your father's golf club and to Mrs. Albright Smythe, the undisputed queen of your mother's charity committees. The court of public opinion, in your family's particular social circle, is, I believe, a rather formidable and very effective auxiliary legal forum. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that reflected the years of quiet resentment, of casual contempt, of profound disappointment. Arthur had dismissed me as a loser, a man without drive. Clarissa had deemed my profession unimportant, my presence at family gatherings a burden. They had consistently undervalued me, underestimated me, and in their arrogance had believed themselves immune to the consequences of their actions. They were about to learn, with a rather spectacular and very public irony, that the quiet one, the cybersecurity expert, had been running a deep, forensic audit on their entire dysfunctional system. And the final report, I knew, would be devastating. The family reunion, I suspected, was about to be permanently and irrevocably canceled. And its cancellation would be delivered, not by an email, but by a legal courier and the devastating truth of their own making. The gift I had in mind for my father, the one he would truly regret, was about to be delivered. And its price, I knew, would be immeasurable. The delivery of Alistair Finch's legal package was, from what my private sources within my family's social circle relayed, a masterclass in controlled legal chaos. My father, Arthur, reportedly received his copy at his home, just as he was settling in for his post-lunch nap, his usual complacent afternoon rudely interrupted by the formidable presence of a stone-faced legal courier. The email I later received from my father, when he finally discovered my private number, presumably from my mother's now terrified inquiries, was a sputtering, incoherent volcano of rage and disbelief. Michael, what in God's name is this slander? This legal blackmail? Are you insane? Disinheritance? Fraud? My name is impeccable. Your mother is distraught. This is an outrage. I ignored the email, of course. My communication with them would now be strictly through Alistair. My brother, Richard, received his copy at his accounting firm, an event that, according to a rather gleeful former colleague of his who happened to witness it, caused a visible panic attack in the firm's reception area. The immediate ensuing crisis meeting within his firm, followed by a series of frantic and presumably rather heated phone calls to Thorne, their solicitor, not Julian Vance, who was Clarissa's associate in deception, clearly indicated that the disinheritance for cause clause and the supporting evidence of his own financial impropriety had landed with devastating precision. Clarissa's reaction when the courier arrived at her Alchemy Arts Collective LLC studio, a thinly veiled front for her various scams, was, according to the same reliable informant who had provided me with the initial damning evidence, even more spectacular. She had apparently thrown the documents to the floor in a fit of hysterical rage, screaming about my vengefulness and my monstrous cruelty, accusing me of attempting to ruin her artistic career with fabricated lies. The chaos in her bohemian art space had reportedly been profound. The concurrent delivery of the formal notice of the probate court petition to the chairman of my father's golf club and to Mrs. Albright Smythe was the true masterstroke of Alastair's strategy. The court of public opinion, in my family's small, insular, and highly judgmental social circle, was a far more terrifying tribunal than any judge or jury. The whispers began immediately. The gossip spread like wildfire. The idea that Arthur Sterling, the pillar of the community, the man of impeccable integrity, was embroiled in a sordid legal battle over disinheritance and allegations of defrauding his own elderly mother, was a scandal of epic proportions. Within days, my father's golf club membership was quietly suspended pending an internal review. My mother, Beatrice, was abruptly and publicly asked to step down from her position as chair of the annual hospital charity ball, her social standing, the very foundation of her existence, crumbling into dust. Their carefully constructed facade of respectability, maintained for decades, was shattering publicly, irrevocably. The family reunion, I knew, was indeed canceled. Permanently. The 6 weeks leading up to the probate court hearing were, I imagine, a living hell for them. The phone calls from her former friends and associates dried up. The invitations to dinner parties ceased. They were isolated, ostracized, forced to live with the public shame of their exposed deceit. Their legal team, led by Thorne, who, I heard through the grapevine, was growing increasingly desperate and resentful of their culpability, tried every conceivable legal maneuver to prevent the hearing, to have the petition dismissed, to discredit my evidence. They claimed my intelligence gathering was illegal, that I was harassing them, that my own mental competency was suspect, a truly ironic twist, given their earlier plans for me. Alastair, however, met each of their attacks with calm, unwavering professionalism, his replies meticulously documented, his arguments unassailable. He was a rock, an unyielding force of legal and factual precision. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom, a quiet, austere space, was filled with a palpable tension. My father, my mother, Richard, and Clarissa, who had somehow managed to drag Julian Vance along with her, though he looked deeply uncomfortable and refused to meet my eye, sat at the opposing table, a grim, huddled group of conspirators, their faces drawn, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear, resentment, and a profound, almost desperate, weariness. They looked defeated, stripped of their social armor, their financial confidence, their arrogant assumptions of impunity. They were just four rather pathetic individuals facing the inevitable consequences of their own monstrous choices. Judge Eleanor Vance, a formidable woman with a reputation for both keen intellect and an absolute intolerance for dishonesty, presided over the proceedings. Alastair, in his opening statement, laid out our case with the precision of a surgeon. He presented the evidence of Clarissa's exploitation of Grandma Eleanor, the fraudulent transactions, the deliberate concealment of funds. He detailed Arthur's complicity, his active participation in the scheme, his efforts to conceal his own illicit gains. He connected their actions directly to the dishonor for cause clause in Grandma Eleanor's trust, a clause designed, he argued, to protect the family legacy from precisely this kind of insidious internal corruption. He then, with a subtle but devastating flourish, introduced the evidence of my father's initial disinvitation email, his casual dismissal of me as a burden, a man whose career was a disappointment. He connected that casual cruelty to the broader pattern of their lifelong undervaluation of me, contrasting it with the immense and now meticulously documented success of my own artisanal business, my financial independence, my quiet but significant personal wealth. He argued that my father's final act of prejudice, his attempt to erase me from the family's history, was the ultimate act of dishonor, a clear and undeniable trigger for the disinheritance clause. The courtroom was silent, save for Alistair's calm, relentless voice. He was building a narrative, a factual, unassailable narrative, that would not just redefine my family's future, but would fundamentally rewrite its past. The gift I had in mind for my father, the one he would truly regret, was about to be delivered. And its price, I knew, would be immeasurable. The judgment, when it finally came, a few weeks after the hearing, was a masterpiece of legal precision and profound irony. Judge Eleanor Vance, in her ruling, found unequivocally that Arthur Sterling and Richard Sterling had, by their actions, engaged in a systematic pattern of financial misconduct, of undue influence over an elderly relative, and of a clear, deliberate attempt to unjustly deprive a rightful beneficiary, myself, of his inheritance. She cited the evidence of Arthur's undeclared offshore accounts, Richard's improper financial dealings, Clarissa's systematic exploitation of Grandma Eleanor, and the clear, documented intent to disinherit me based on a prejudice that was, in the court's words, contrary to the fundamental principles of fairness, equity, and familial duty. Therefore, she ruled, with immediate and irrevocable effect, that Arthur Sterling and Richard Sterling had indeed triggered the disinheritance for cause clause in Grandma Eleanor's trust. Their shares, their lifelong expectation of a substantial inheritance, were forfeited permanently and irrevocably. The entirety of Grandma Eleanor's considerable estate, including the lake house, her investments, and all other assets, was to be redistributed. And the sole remaining, non-offending beneficiary, the loser, the burden, the man who had been disinvited from the family reunion, was now me. The financial implications for my father and my brother were catastrophic. Their own financial affairs, already precarious, were now thrown into utter ruin. Arthur, stripped of his perceived legacy and his comfortable retirement, was forced into actual, rather than self-proclaimed, obscurity. Richard, whose accounting firm was now under investigation for its complicity in his father's schemes, faced not just financial ruin, but the very real prospect of losing his professional license and facing criminal charges. Clarissa, as a co-conspirator, was also ordered to make full restitution for the funds she had misappropriated from Grandma Eleanor, a sum she could ill afford, forcing her into bankruptcy. Julian Vance, her partner in crime, having been caught in the net of my broader investigation, was already facing fraud charges in another jurisdiction, his career as a predatory wealth guru definitively over. Justice, it seemed, was not always swift, but when delivered with Alistair Finch's meticulous precision, it was undeniably comprehensive. My father, in his final years, became a profoundly diminished figure. The bluff arrogance, the patriarchal pronouncements, the unwavering certainty of his own superiority, all of it evaporated, replaced by a sullen, bitter silence. He lived out his remaining days in a small, nondescript apartment, a world away from the grandeur of his former life, his golf club membership long since revoked, his social circle evaporated. He never apologized, not explicitly, but his profound, almost catatonic despair was a testament to the utter destruction of his ego, his identity, his entire sense of self. Richard, my brother, fared little better. He lost his firm, his home, his reputation. He struggled to find work, his name tainted by the scandal. Our relationship, once defined by his condescension, was now characterized by a vast, unspoken chasm of recrimination and regret. He never reached out. I never saw him again after the final legal papers were signed. My mother, Beatrice, was perhaps the most tragic figure in all of this. Caught between her husband's pride and her own desperate desire to maintain appearances, she had enabled their deceit, turning a blind eye to their manipulations. She retreated into a kind of reclusive misery, her social world shattered, her primary concern now merely surviving from day to day on a greatly reduced income. The family reunion, the very event that had served as the catalyst for this entire saga, was never held again. The lake house, now unequivocally mine, remained a place of peace, of quiet solitude, a sanctuary for me and for my own very different life. I kept it, not as a symbol of triumph, but as a reminder of my grandfather's foresight, of the enduring power of truth, and of the profound irony of a legacy saved, not by bloodline, but by meticulous planning and a quiet, unyielding commitment to justice. My own life, in the aftermath of this dramatic and deeply personal financial reckoning, flourished. The proceeds from Grandma Eleanor's estate, now solely under my control, became the foundation for a new and far more meaningful kind of wealth. I established a series of significant charitable foundations in my grandfather's name dedicated to promoting financial literacy and ethical conduct in business, providing scholarships for young, disadvantaged students pursuing careers in accounting and financial forensics, and supporting programs for elder protection against financial fraud. It was a legacy of principled action, a transformation of past wrongs into future good. My automata business, my true passion, continued to thrive, my creations sought after by collectors and museums worldwide. I found a deep, quiet satisfaction in the intricate work of bringing my mechanical masterpieces to life, a satisfaction that far outweighed any corporate title or inherited fortune. My father, in his email, had sought to define me as a burden, a disappointment. He had no idea that his casual cruelty would become the catalyst for my own profound and entirely self-made liberation. The man he had deemed useless had, in the end, proven to be the most valuable asset of all. And the gift he had intended as a final, hurtful rejection had, instead, become the key to my own, true, and immensely satisfying financial and personal sovereignty. The audit was complete. The accounts, at last, were perfectly and irrevocably balanced.